Right, if you're just joining us, the images that you can see there are of Sandton, and that's just north of Johannesburg, and this is the venue for the latest in the series of New Age business briefings brought to you by the SABC, and we're talking about African cities. African City Summit, which is taking place here in just 73 days' time, bringing people interested in local government across the continent, and in fact many people will be coming from other parts of the world to see what's happening on this continent. Agenda 2063 sharply in focus, the Africa that we want. Our guests have been talking a little bit about what this Afro-City Summit will be about and what Agenda 2063 will do for us. Well, let's start to unpack these issues a bit more and also get your questions at Morning Live SABC. And I just want to come back to you, sir. Just before the break, one of the issues that Councillor Manyoni raised was about gender and the role of women in local government. We had a debate here in South Africa a couple of weeks ago about that issue, and whilst progress is being made, it's not happening at a great rate. And I'm just wondering, what's been your experience as you look across the continent? Is this something that we need to accelerate if we're going to get to Agenda 2063?
Well, our organization took a decision to ask all political parties and all government to target a minimum of 30% of local officials as women. This is the target. In some of the countries on the continent, we have already legislation. Like in Senegal, they state that half of the elected local authorities should be women. In Rwanda, you have a good number of women elected. So the target of 30 is a minimum that we suggest that every country adopt as a rule. It can be legislated, or it can be just educating the parties to do justice on the fact that half of the ceiling, half of our world, half of our population are composed by women. So we need women in local government, and we also saw, but I don't know if it is right everywhere, but in many countries we saw that local government that are managed by women tend to be more transparent than the others. So it also shows that the more we include women in our public governance, the more we improve our governance in the continent. So women are key to bring into the fore in managing our cities.
Okay, Councillor Thabo, I want you to pick up on that as well, because and I'll bring up some of the issues that came in our last conversation with some of the women in local government. But I'm just wanting to get a sense from your experience, because I suppose my fear is often we just want to meet targets, but that there's a real case for having women in government and the difference that they've been making. What's been your observation?
I think that in fact there's a real case and there's demonstrable evidence that women play a prominent role in governance. If you think about it, in Gauteng, two of the members of the Executive Council were councillors in the city of Johannesburg, prominent in their own right, leaders in their own right that have gone on to become members of the Executive Council. The same applies to KwaZulu-Natal and other provinces. The Deputy Executive Director of UN Habitat was the mayor of Kigali in Rwanda and grew up the ranks of local government to become a prominent international leader. And there are a whole range of examples. We've got a prominent leader in local government, the Mayor of Victoria in Seychelles, who's active on the African continent, and the list of prominent local government leaders that are women goes on. And I think that we need to celebrate it, because the first thing that we need to do is to celebrate the progress that's been made in the process of the emancipation of women and the recognition of the reality that, in fact, we are equally capable between men and women, and that we need to overcome the gender imbalances that historically have been there.
Okay. Councillor Manyoni, a couple of weeks ago, we spoke to women, and some of the concerns that they had was, yes, we might be making progress in placing women, and we've got some great examples here, but they're saying that sometimes their voice is not heard, even when they are in those positions. What are we doing to empower them so that they not just occupying seats, but actually have a voice?
Yes, it is true. We must accept the fact that the Africa continent in general has been a patriotic society where women basically were supposed to be just, people who are working in the kitchen and so on, and not leading in society. And I think that mentality is still prevalent in our societies. Yes, in South Africa, we basically have made strides in this regard. You know that the ruling parties are agreed. It is now fashionable, 50-50 as we say. For every woman, there must be a man in government. And also, in terms of your gender parity, you get penalized if your institution, particularly in local government, you don't meet certain targets and so on. And this platform, of course, it's where we basically are benchmarking and also sharing ideas with our brothers and sisters in the continent. But the fact of the matter is, our practices, as you are saying, and the way we do things, we still have to go a long way in ensuring that there's total emancipation of women and making sure that women can play a role in our society. Obviously, it's not an event. It is a process. It needs a mindset change and so forth. But I must indicate that where women have done well, breaking those ceilings and barriers, they basically also are assisting others who will come after them. Who has ever thought that a mayor, for instance, the former mayor from Windhoek, which is also a new democracy, was basically a woman. Quite recently, she also went now to parliament. You can see that Africa is really trying when it comes to matters of women emancipation and getting women really to be leaders in government.
All right, 2063 sounds like into the future, but it's actually just now. It's literally going to happen quite quickly. And I'm just wondering, Secretary General Mbassi, with the statistics that we sort of shared at the beginning, the population explosion, we're going to be the most populous region in the world, and also the urbanization process. I'm just wondering, what kind of paradigm shift do we need to make? Because it needs to happen quickly. What things do you see across the continent that we need to be changing if we're going to get to 2063?
There is a wisdom in my country. I'm coming from Cameroon, that says that the elephant walk in the forest, but since it is dumb, it doesn't hear its own feet. Only the other beast in the forest said, "Oh, who is so heavy? Who was so heavy?" And it is exactly what happened with Africa. Many of our young people are dying, crossing the Mediterranean to find a living in Europe. And we see many Chinese, European, American, Indian, Turkish pouring in Africa, coming to harvest your endowment. So they see you as a huge elephant, and you see yourself as a minor player. And this is what we have to change. Build self-confidence on this continent so that people realize that yes, will be the most populated region in the world, and history is about human beings. If you are so numerous, you should have a say in the way this world is run. If we are so numerous and so endowed, we should first of all think of creating wealth on our continent. And if we are so interested in having the voice of Africa heard, we should change totally our mindset and say that nobody will build this continent apart of their children. So for us, 2063 is not just a dream. It is a trajectory for Africa to recover its rightful place in the world. And we have all the means to do that. Remember when the DRC became independent, there were 2 people at the university. Today, we have a continent which is more and more literate, with young people competing with any young guy in the world. We have the most booming ICT society, even if many governments don't recognize that our young people are so brilliant. So we need to rebuild this self-confidence and hope on this continent. And the place where you can do that, for sure, is at the local level. Because at the local level, you don't have statistics to talk about growth. You've got water, you've got electricity, you've got school, you've got health centers, and this is what you call development. At the national level, they got statistics, growth rate, and they can be happy to announce that they are good followers of the World Bank and the IMF. But this is not what at the local level we call development and growth. And this is why going local is so essential. I repeat myself, for people to own their lives, and for the young people to discover the capacities that this continent has for their future. And I repeat, nobody will build Africa. Only Africans will build Africa.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on that. I'm going to turn to you, Councillor Thabo. 1.3 billion people are going to be living in cities like Johannesburg before 2050. It's not even 2063. So the urbanization process is happening. It's happening very, very quickly. A lot of our cities were built for populations for the 50s and the 60s. And the pace of change in terms of population and infrastructure has been slow, and we're struggling. In fact, I think the NEPAD CEO once said that what's happening with urbanization is we're seeing the ruralification of our cities. And I'm just wondering, how does a city like Johannesburg take this problem and make sure that we don't make our cities become like rural towns as a result of this urbanization?
Well, there are a number of things that are going to be important as we deal with it. The first is about building the capacity of the cities to accommodate the number of people that are coming into the cities. The second is about building the tax bases for our municipalities to be able to generate the revenue so that they're able to deal with the challenges and to redefine the financing systems, not just nationally, but internationally, so that you're able to support the local authorities. I mean, one of the initiatives that the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, is running with relates to illicit capital movement. And that's the reality of capital moving out of the country that's untaxed and is unable to benefit the people of Africa. And we need to find ways of ensuring that that tax base is able to enable our cities to accommodate the people that are coming here. So from that point of view, we need to look at urbanization also as an opportunity to tap into a new cadre of people, capacity, entrepreneurship that comes into cities and enables the cities to grow and prosper. And I think that whilst it comes with its own challenges, in many instances, it comes as a great opportunities. I mean, great cities have grown at the back of migrants and urbanization. This is where people meet, they are able to innovate, interact, and become entrepreneurs, and we need to create platforms in our cities to enable that. But one of the other issues that we've identified as strategic on the African continent is about building networks among cities. One of the tasks that we've been asked to undertake as the city of Johannesburg is to build a network of strategic African cities from which our different regions could be able to grow and prosper. So you use your strategic cities like Lagos, Johannesburg, Addis, Cairo as your platforms from which you're able to say, the other cities would be able to leverage from, entire regions can leverage from the cities. And we've taken on this challenge as saying the responsibility is set to us in Johannesburg. Can we initiate this process so that we don't just end up in meetings, but we can develop practical programs? And those programs would relate to logistics, they would relate to identifying strategic port cities, and this would be seaports, inland ports, airports that we're able to use to facilitate and grow trade amongst African countries. And the reality is that you're going to need these cities as the platform from which you're able to facilitate this trade. One of the great challenges that we face on the African continent is traveling from one part of Africa to another. We don't have enough ability to travel from one part to another. In certain instances, you need to fly to Europe to get back to Central Africa. And that's part of the challenge. But who are you going to use as the anchor around which you're going to grow that sort of interface from the logistics related to people and goods? You have to use your cities and your strategic port cities as the ability from which you can be able to facilitate that sort of interface and trade amongst African cities, and thus use your strategic cities to anchor that growth in our respective regions.
All right. I'm going to take a break just now, but just before that, Councillor Manyoni, I'm just wondering if that's your experience, because you're wearing the SALGA hat, you see everybody. How do we build the smaller municipalities, the smaller towns, so that there isn't this pressure of everybody wanting to rush to Bloemfontein, to Johannesburg, to Cape Town?
Yes, it is true, and it is happening all over the continent. It's not only people who are looking for better opportunities in the major cities. You also have instability, particularly in the middle of Africa, towards the north, which basically is caused by what my colleague, Councillor Thabo, has referred to, illicit movement of capital, including, of course, looting of minerals and so on, displacing of people. And then these people are also looking for better conditions, and cities are the centers where they think they will be able to survive and so forth. And as mayors of the cities, particularly in Africa, we say we need to build resilient cities, sustainable cities, even smaller towns, because if you don't build those centers, then people will move to the major capitals. So we need to have a balance. For instance, in South Africa, we have adopted what we call integrated urban development framework, where we are saying, as much as you are developing your cities, you also need to look into your rural economies, modernizing your agricultural sector and so on, to make sure that at least there is sustainability and livelihoods in those centers, because if you don't, then there's a movement of people to the urban centers. So you need to basically have a balance in this regard. I must indicate, of course, in this regard, you also need to work with your central governments. You also need to have partners who will be able to assist. You will not necessarily do it on your own as a small center out there.
All right. We're going to take another break, and we'll start getting questions from the floor as well as from you at Morning Live SABC. And there's still a number of issues to look at. Smart cities, for example, climate change. How is that being dealt with on the AfriCities agenda and the AfriCities Summit that's coming up? Okay, stay with us, and we look forward to hearing from you at home as well after this.